maybe we overlooked Kansas in the Big 12 championship race. That is an overreaction take to week one. Now, the Jayhawks in their new $450 million stadium, they actually get to play real home games this year. That's a program that I think is good this year. I think they're an 8-9 win team, presuming Jalon Daniels stays healthy. He was on Saturday. They played Fresno State, who is in the midst of a little bit of a rebuild there. I thought that game would be uncomfortable for Kansas for a half. It lasted a quarter and a half, and then it was, okay, Kansas is totally fine. That's a really, really good sign. Overreaction would be, look, we overlooked Kansas in the Big 12 championship race. Kansas is about what I expected them to be on Saturday. You're playing a Group of 5 team. You've got you got a veteran quarterback, first of all. Warner on the other side, who threw a couple of interceptions, is experienced at the Group of 5 level, but is new to Fresno State. Matt Entz at Fresno State's a really good coach. Don't be surprised if in 2 years' time I'm on this program talking about Fresno State as a potential college football playoff team for the Group of 5 berth coming out of the Pac-12. That's a very realistic scenario that can happen. They are not that right now. So it's a good sign for Kansas. Avoiding disaster, doing what you should do against an inferior team. Don't take that for granted. Ask UNLV. Dan Mullen, who I think I hit the nail on the head when I said there's no good outcome really for UNLV on Saturday. We saw that. They almost lost to an FCS team. Idaho State, who's got some guys. Quarterback looked phenomenal. I'm going to be calling their game on Saturday against Southern Utah. But that was a bad first game for Dan Mullen. They were losing in the second half to an FCS team. It was almost a disaster. Dan Mullen could do fine, but that didn't look very good. So for Kansas, coming off a major letdown season in which people like myself or Drake Toll locked on Big 12 or Joel Klatt picked them to go to the Big 12 championship game, to come out and reassure the fan base in game one, hey, we're capable of not playing down to our opponent's level, which they did a couple times last year. That was a good sign. That was a good sign. That's all. I don't think there's a major takeaway. That was a good sign. But going back to the Farmageddon, I was thinking about that game more and more, and it was phenomenal. It was awesome. You know what stood out the most when I really started to think about it? It wasn't the quarterbacks. Rocco Becht was not efficient, but made some big throws. Avery Johnson was a little more efficient, took a while to settle into the game, needed the rain to cool down. They're not going to play in a game, in all likelihood, maybe until November or December, that's that ugly in terms of weather conditions again. I wasn't thinking about the quarterbacks. I was thinking about the defensive lines. Did you watch Kansas State's defensive line? I was feeling really good about my pick of the Wildcats. Starting the year 0-for-1 with my big game picks is just a banger of a way to begin the season. But, sometimes you go 0-1 in your March Madness bracket, and then you look up and you go, oh, look at that, 98th percentile. That was kind of me this past year. I think I was like 93rd. Anyway, this is a college football show. I'm just trying to speak optimism into existence for my picks for the rest of the year. But one of the reasons I like Kansas State early on was their defensive front was absolutely forceful. And I thought to myself, when was the last time I watched a Big 12 clash like that and it felt like it was about the defense and the defenses were shining? And yeah, the weather conditions were definitely helping. But do you know what it looks like when you have two teams that can legitimately lean on their defenses for prolonged stretches when you have ugly conditions? It looks like that. You're not getting gashed on the ground. It wasn't just that both teams were struggling to throw the ball early in the game. It was that the defensive lines were looking so fast and physical. And I started thinking, yes, about Texas Tech. That's how I want Texas Tech to look. I hope that Texas Tech, for the sake of my pick that they're making the Big 12 championship game along with Kansas State, Wildcats, the ball is in your court. You can lose one game the rest of the year, if that. So, yeah, don't screw it up, guys. Don't screw it up. But the Big 12 has always been thought of as a conference where you don't play any defense. It's all about offense, and every game is 56-52, and it's exciting and it's fun, but they don't do... That game looked like two teams that had real guys coming off the edge, that had real players in the front seven. Austin Romaine, the linebacker for Kansas State, is a dude. Absolute dude. That's one of the reasons I like Kansas State coming into this year is you've got a leader like him right smack dab in the middle. But I love the way that defensive line played for Kansas State. And I love the way in the second half, Iowa State was able to take control of the game. How? Not with Rocco Becht throwing the ball, but with Rocco Becht turning around and handing the ball off, and it wasn't even to Abu Sama. The offensive line for Iowa State completely shifted that game. We haven't always seen Big 12 matchups, whether being ugly or not. In the second half, teams were able to throw the ball. Avery Johnson finished 21 of 30. That's greater than 66% completion, I think. Here, let me do a quick calculation there. That's 70% completion. Avery Johnson completed 70% of his passes. I think he started 1 of 5, 1 of 6. And then all of a sudden he got it going. But how did Iowa State control the game? With the rushing attack. And that's a different style of football than what you typically think of from any team in the Big 12, let alone one that you think can win the conference or make the college football playoff. So I think Iowa State should be looked at exactly how you think if you knew coming into the year what my Big 12 power rankings were, and I'll throw them up here on YouTube, where Iowa State is 4th and Kansas State is 3rd, and boy, it looked like that on Saturday. If you knew that coming into the year, you'd think, well, they shouldn't have just one way to win a game, right? Didn't look that way to me. They were able to survive the weather and some early turnovers. They were able to make plays on defense. Iowa State got huge stops on 3rd and 4th in short scenarios. Kansas State's front looked like they were controlling the game in the early going. And then Iowa State's offensive line was able to make the push back. Both quarterbacks, I thought, played very well. And Becht in particular was phenomenal situationally. But this was a game that featured such great trench play. And I wonder if we say that about whoever ends up winning the Big 12 championship game. Because if you watched that game and thought, oh, Iowa State is for real, and Kansas State is too, it's just their path is really difficult now because they lose the head-to-head with the Cyclones. You're right. You're right that the path is much more difficult. But one of the reasons that I picked Texas Tech to make the Big 12 championship game this year is that they invested in the trenches because they knew they weren't good enough in there. Well, I watched those two teams, and boy, they look like conference title contenders, and they look more than good enough to match up with anybody or be better than anybody else in the trenches. One of the reasons that I like Utah to be a contender in the Big 12 this year, the trench play is always there. You don't think of that. You think trench play, you think Big 10 first, you think SEC second, probably. Or maybe you think SEC first and Big 10 second. I think Big 10 maybe more offensively. You think trenches. SEC, you think more defensively, typically, when you talk about a team that's going to go win a conference championship. But I thought the physicality from both of those teams was dictating who was in control of the game. So anybody else that wants to beat them throughout the course of their Big 10 schedule or Big 12 schedule, you better bring your horses up front. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.